I'd like to start this morning by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. My name's Joanne Nyland. I'm the Deputy Director of Advancement and Head of Alumni Relations at Griffith University, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this alumni breakfast. The Griffith Alumni Network is committed to creating opportunities for alumni and students by providing access to a range of benefits and services, networking opportunities, lifelong learning, professional development, social events, and much more, including things like this morning's breakfast. So I'd like to highlight for you a couple of particular items. You might be considering some further study, especially if you're looking for new skills or to upskill in the current marketplace. And Griffith has an innovative range of 100 stackable professional courses that are matched to the emerging economy and which can be tailored to your needs. And why that's especially exciting to tell you about this morning is that graduated Griffith alumni get a 10% discount off those courses. We're also about to launch this year's annual appeal, which fundraises for scholarships for students in need. Everybody had a really tough year last year, and having worked in higher education for about 25 years now, I've never seen a tougher year for students. At the beginning of the pandemic, many of them were struggling. We had to move all of our teaching online, and many of them were losing part-time jobs. And so the support of scholarships like the ones we fund through our annual appeal is really, really important to those students, and never more so than now. The theme for this year's annual appeal is lifting up students, and that really is relevant to this time. And you will receive some communication around that in coming weeks. From last year's annual appeal, which we combined with our staff giving programme at Griffith, we were able to provide 134 life-changing scholarships for students, but there were many more applications that we weren't able to support. So I'm really asking you and encouraging you to join me in supporting this year's appeal. This morning's breakfast is an opportunity to hear from our wonderful panel of alumni, hosted by Katarina Gutjahr-Holland, a recent environmental health graduate and a 2020 New Colombo Plan scholar. And after we've had breakfast, she'll join us and introduce the panel. I do need to let you know that this morning's panel session is being recorded, and we will share that content at a later date, probably on our YouTube channel. And if you've not seen our YouTube channel, on the registration desk where you came in, there's a QR code, and that will take you directly there. There's a whole heap of resources on there that we created mainly over the last 12 or so months when we did a lot of our alumni programming online. And so you can revisit all those resources on that platform. We do encourage you to continue the discussion after today's breakfast, so please feel free to share your key takeaways on our social media channels using the hashtag Griffith Alumni. So we're on Facebook, LinkedIn and Instagram. For now though, I'm going to invite the wonderful staff of the Sofitel in Brisbane to provide us with some nourishment so that we're all fed and caffeinated and ready to go to listen to our wonderful panel. So after breakfast, Katarina will be back to commence the panel discussion.
It's really good to be here. I can see some familiar faces and some new faces. It's very exciting. My name is Katarina, and I am currently an Environmental Health Officer at Queensland Health, and I graduated last year from Griffith, from a Bachelor of Health Science, majoring in Environmental Health. And I'm joined here by three incredible women who I have the pleasure of introducing. And firstly, I'll just shift because the microphone seems to not move with me. Firstly, Ricky, here next to me. And Ricky is the Senior Manager of Content and Social at Bupa, and has 10 years experience in HR, customer experience and digital, but started actually at the Qantas graduate program. And now she has a Masters of Marketing, and in the last year she's been working remotely, like so many of us, and trying to lead a dispersed team. And next to Ricky, there's Alison. And Alison is the Senior Sustainability Manager at Telstra. And she is driving Telstra's global environmental strategy to be an environmental leader in resource efficiency. And Alison combines a technical background in environmental engineering and environmental science with a management background, and now has a Masters in Business and Sustainability in HR. And her passion is making organisations stronger, fairer and more sustainable to then help communities and societies thrive. And then lastly I have here Lorna, who's a lawyer with McCullough Robertson Lawyers, and in the digital and intellectual property team. And Lorna has combined previous experience in the Queensland film industry with now her postgraduate Juris Doctor in law. And she works with clients locally and internationally. You might know some, Queensland Ballet, Flight Centre, and she advises on privacy, technology, social media, startups and digital platforms. So our goal today will be to speak about aligning your values with your workplace and really trying to identify what some of those values might be, what happens when there's a conflict between workplace and values, and maybe also if any of our speakers have influenced workplace values and how they did that and what the result was. So I'm going to start with you, Ricky. What do values mean to you and how do they come into the workplace?
I think for me, values is one of those things that you intrinsically have as a person, and those things don't tend to change, and you kind of develop those really early on. And then values in a workplace is an interesting piece because it's kind of a broader piece. You understand more about the impacts that culture has and the impacts that working for a company that has values in line with you, but you're never going to find something that's a complete perfect fit. So I think it's about understanding what of your core values are essential and non-negotiable, and then how do you influence those other pieces as well. So for me, I've always strived to go for companies that I have a synergy with and can understand what their product is, and I have ended up in the customer experience kind of world, so I'm really passionate about delivering really good customer experience, which fundamental for Qantas, and I always loved with Qantas that element of bringing people back to their families, and actually I still tear up at the ad that they did around Feels Like Home and people coming back from the UK and things like that. And then with Bupa, I think that was really interesting for me that I didn't understand a lot about the health insurance industry, but Bupa is a lot broader company than that. So I do a lot of work with their optical business and their dental business, and we have an aged care business as well. So I think for me it was really grappling with my own values when it actually came to healthcare and working within the system that we have within Australia as well to make it the best possible kind of situation for as many people as possible. So I think values is a really interesting thing because you have those so intrinsic within you, but you can't always fully align that with an organisation, but you have to work out what's your complete non-negotiables. So yeah.
And what about you, Alison? Do you have non-negotiable values as well? And how did that come in when you started working for Telstra?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and I think it draws out a couple of things that I've been thinking about. And I think there's the things that you have as values, and then the things that you value in the workplace. And the things that you have as sort of core values are things that I would call my non-negotiables, and the things that I sort of seek out and align with. And then there's things I value in the workplace that I have control over, and I get to create and modify the way I turn up to work, the type of teams I work in, how I run my team, those kind of day-to-day symbols of culture that create an environment that people thrive in, versus the things that I can't control. And those things are things that you have to identify early and continue to reassess and adapt and try and influence where you can. But if you do get to a point where the things that are outside of your control within the workplace, and you value them strongly and you're not willing to compromise on them, that's when you get to the point, I think, where you then really start to reassess your plans. A good example is, a couple of years ago, I loved my workplace. I work at Telstra. Once again, find it really cool connecting Australians, connecting us globally. We have a really exciting mission. I had a really exciting role, but my day-to-day experience didn't give me that fulfillment that I needed, and typical millennial, kind of keen for that constant growth. And it took me a while to realise that was actually the responsibility of my workplace. That was my responsibility, and to seek that development and growth in different ways, and to bring it in every day. So, I think it takes a bit of learning sometimes to really sift through what is core, what is not, what's in your control and what's not. And then understand how that changes with time as well. I found when I first entered the workplace, it was all about, growth, adventure, opportunity, and things change over time where you really start to focus. I found myself really started to focus on impact and outcome. And if I found that I was working week to week on things where I couldn't really feel that sense of value in the outcome or link that to the kind of impact I was having on the world, I really found that difficult. And then as I started to lead teams and, started to really focus on the value in leadership and the kind of leader that I was and the kind of leadership I expected in the workplace, things evolved again. I think it's really important to constantly check in on your intrinsic values may not change over time, but the things you value in the workplace, the things you value in your day-to-day experience of that workplace, I think evolve quite a lot over time. And so, it's a fundamental question that sometimes should feel easy to answer. What do I value and what do I value in the workplace? But I think it's one of those things that is just always evolving.
Yeah, and the half an hour odd we have is clearly not enough time. I'm getting that feeling. And then, Lorna, you've changed from the Queensland film industry and then gone into law, which, to an outsider feels like North and South Pole. How did that work out for you? And what did values have a role to play in that?
Yeah, so I guess if we turn our mind to that original question of what our values and what they mean, to draw from screenwriting, if you ever want to show a person's true character or what they value or their priorities, you don't do that by exposition, you have them make important decisions under pressure. And so drawing from that concept, values to me have always been these sort of principles or things that we value and prioritise. And they're unique to us and they help us make important decisions in life, which then align us with what we're doing, with who we are. And so for me, values were always really important to all the different decisions that I've made in my life and pivoting. I always knew from a young age that I really wanted to work with the creatives and the innovators. And at 17, you're not, although you think you are, sure about how you're going to go about achieving that and what vision you want for your life. And so I started off wanting to do acting. I was 16, I got taken to Los Angeles, was very fortunate and asked to come back when I'd finished high school, and decided that just didn't seem to align with me after going over there and spending quite a bit of time there. So I went and studied screenwriting, and I'm still very passionate about screenwriting. And when I finished my degree, my mentor said, well, you're still quite young, I was 20, go and get some life experience. So I went and worked for Qantas as a flight attendant for just under 2 years, and did that by day and then worked on my writing by night. And then again, I got this amazing opportunity to go back to LA and put my work in front of a few people. And luck had it that one of them had directed for The Office and one of them had worked for Disney. And they said, okay, still green, but we think you have talent. We want to help you get into a writer's room over here, but you need to move to Los Angeles. It's going to be a very difficult journey. To try and get a visa to work there is very hard. And you need to decide what it is that you really want. And so I came back to Australia and really thought about that, self-analysed, thought about my values, and it was really important to me. I really believe in Australia's creative industries and I wanted to work here. So I finished up with Qantas, I moved back, I worked for a talent agency in Queensland, and it was a really exciting time in the industry where we just landed Pirates of the Caribbean, scouting for pirates down in Burleigh was really fun. And Thor had just started, and so I did that, had an amazing opportunity and really loved it. But I think I got to about 25 and decided, okay, what is it that I value? I want longevity. I really miss using the analytical part of my brain as well. I was always drawn to law. Is this what I want to do moving forward, like for the next 10 years? Or what do I do and what are the decisions that I make now to put in place to sort of get myself to a point where I can see a lot of longevity in the career that I take? And so I decided for me, that would be going back and doing a Juris Doctor and doing my law degree. And being somebody who could serve those industries by being a good lawyer and bridging the gap between creative industries and professionals. And so when I went back and studied, I was very steadfast in I wanted to be an intellectual property lawyer, work in the digital and media space and work with creatives and innovators. And that's where I've ended up. I've working for a really fantastic firm doing that. And all of those steps along the way, while it might look a bit disjointed objectively from afar, they've always been guided, and there's been pivoting and moving and trial and error, but it's all been informed by values and really sitting back and looking at, okay, what is it that I want, who am I, and what does my decisions look like now to get myself to a point where I'm really living this work-life harmony.
So how did you figure that out? Other than going to LA, hanging around here, trying to figure out what you want to do or how you want to integrate that. Did you do any active steps? Did you do anything tangible, or was it a natural process that over time you found that you identified, okay, A, B, and C is a must?
Values evolve through life experience, and like I said, sometimes it's trial and error, and it's very okay to go down one track and say, oh, hang on a second, I thought I valued this, but I actually really want to have some stability in my workplace and to not, be continually poor all the time. And I think that whenever you make a big decision, you really need to take the time out, which is commensurate to that decision. So it was never like one week I was like, oh, I'm working here and that looks like a good idea. I'll just go and invest, a whole bunch of money into doing a law degree. I think we all start to feel where for me, continual growth is something that I really value. When I started to feel like I'd hit a bit of a buffer, that's when you need to stop and think. And really, sometimes you need to just take a break to realise, oh, actually, everything's okay. I'm just very tired and COVID just happened last year. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes you need to take the time out and go, okay, is this really aligning and how do I shift and be malleable and adapt and create a new strategy? Taking with everything that I've learnt from the different steps that I've taken to apply it to what I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm. And Ricky, have you had some experiences where you've had that conflict with values and workplace, going in and then thinking, oh, that's not quite right, coming back?
I definitely was nodding along with a lot of that, because I think it's always interesting. I always use the phrase of, I don't know what I want to be when I would grow up. And I imagine that when I'm 60, 70, 80, I'm still not going to know what I want to be when I grow up, because I think that evolves over time as well. So as much as it's about finding the right workplace, it's also about finding the right type of job. And I think it's really important in that to not see any of those steps as failure. They were just about trying to find the next thing you wanted to do. Something made sense at that particular point in your life. So for me, I actually started in HR. So I studied HR, did my first year HR course, and went, oh, I like that, that makes sense. I know what to put into Seek when I search for that job. And I really loved it, but it was about understanding. The bit I loved about it was helping people, and the bit I loved about it was connecting with having an impact on someone's day-to-day life. So that kind of concept actually led me into the customer experience side. So there's a lot of similarity in those two things, as much as anyone in either of those departments doesn't see that. And then from there I went, oh, customer experience, okay, digital. Digital's just a digital version of customer experience. And I remember when I moved across into digital, everyone had really come from a technology background and were kind of like, I don't understand how these steps work. And I think it gives you so much uniqueness in the way that you can do your job, the way that you lead, and the way that you get things done in your history on how you got there. So I think that's really fundamental to me, that your journey is just as much about making you really good at your job and about making sure that you bring a unique skill set and a unique set of values and a unique kind of behaviours to that job, that it actually matters all those steps. And that's what I kind of found really interesting is none of this is failure, none of this is about anything was a waste of time or I shouldn't have gone down that path. Everything ends up weirdly leading to your perfect little trail of where you go in life.
That's so true, and always being kind to yourself along the way, because every experience is valid.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And so then how did it go working remotely last year? How did you find, did you still have that sense of satisfaction that you were helping people and providing customer experience, or did you suddenly find being out of the office, you were deprived of that?
Yeah, so I'm the first to admit I love the office. I would work from the office 5 days a week if I could. And I was like that before COVID. I knew that I didn't work well at home. I kind of get my energy off being around other people. So I went on a holiday in March last year and never went back. I kind of flew back into Australia, and a couple of days later we were working from home, and then that's pretty much been it since. And I found that a really interesting experience for me, to have to gain my own personal motivation and to reassess some of the bits about how do I kind of replicate getting this energy off people in that kind of individual environment at home. And then as part of that change, last year I started leading a team again through COVID, which was really interesting for me because 2 out of my 3 team members, I only met them this year. I met them in March this year, and I've been their manager since July. So I think for me, trying to build connection and trying to build rapport and trying to build trust and support, doing that in a remote environment was a really interesting challenge for me. But I think is also just the way the world is going to go now. So it's made me much more confident that I could do that type of thing if I work for a multinational company that's kind of based in different locations. As it is, my company's based across Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane, so I'm always working remotely with people. But I do think it takes a bit of time to reassess what parts were the really important bit about being in the office, and how do you replicate that, and how do you get your own self-motivation and realign that. I think for probably the first few months I was this is happening to me. And I think, Alison, what you were saying before about you have to work out what's in your control and what's not, and having to make a conscious decision to actually make the best out of a situation as well.
That's a really good point. So it's happening to me, and then realising maybe I need to install a water cooler or a coffee machine at home,
Exactly.
so it feels like the office again.
I started setting up virtual coffees. So I was like, who were the people that I used to sit in a pod with? And even we set up Teams channels of just the people that used to be on our desk. Because it was like, oh, here's a random thing I want to say to someone, and no one's here to say it. So we'd just chuck that in there. And I think that was really important, so that I wasn't just working with the people I had work to do with. Yeah.
That's great. So you still had that a culture in the office, and you're able to nurture that. So that was something that was really important to you.
Oh, absolutely. And my team very much learned I am absolutely competitive when it comes to the quizzes, and very good at the travel questions. Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. And Alison, you've talked a lot about sustainability, and in your bio, it talks about that. Would you say that is something that's core to you, or did you fall into that when you were at Telstra? In other words, how did you become a sustainability manager?
Yeah, so I started my career in the mining industry actually, and I loved it because it was big and their equipment was big and the decision making was big, and the opportunity for impact was huge in those communities. The opportunity for damage was huge in those communities and in those environments. But I really found myself wanting to look beyond a site level, and I think as you find roles in an operational environment are very different to roles in a more strategic one, and that's where I really loved to work. So when I moved out of mining into telecommunications and found myself in an environmental role in a broader health, safety, wellbeing, environment and protective security group, which is the world's longest title for a team, but found myself then in quite a multimodal role. So I was working in strategy, governance, reporting, do a lot of engagement with our board and our executive teams. And I found that it was a job no one wanted. Writing board papers is not fun for anyone. But it gave me so much experience on how to lead and manage an organisation, how to make good decisions as an executive. And it really adds perspective, I think, to how the world works and how to really influence and have an impact. And I knew that working operationally, I had, a very interesting role that I could contain and control and I could define, and I could have an impact here. Or I could work across a really frustrating large organisation in a corporate governance role where you work hard and you work long and you takes forever to make a change, but when you do, the impact is enormous, and I find that really addictive. So I moved into sustainability. I always knew I wanted to do something that made a difference to people, to the environment we live in. I think we're so blessed to live in Australia, and we have an obligation to look after this country and to look after the things that we hold valuable here, and our relationships with other countries. And so I always knew there was a role there that I really wanted to have an impact. I loved working in strategic work. I found really a lot of value in that sort of health and wellbeing and safety space, but really fundamental to me was how do we look after this place that we love so much. So I made myself valuable to the sustainability group, and over time worked my way into a very aligned role, and then last year jumped across. So now I'm leading our group to implement our resource efficiency targets, which is all about creating more circular economy environments for materials flows. So the things we use and design aren't just used and designed for that one purpose, but for the next purpose and the next purpose after that. And we think about, in Telstra's context, we have millions of mobile phones that are getting manufactured every day. We have enormous opportunity to be smarter with the materials we use. And the role that I can play might make a small change, but that change has a huge scale, and that's what I found really addictive. So I think it's really interesting that values sort of shape the type of role I wanted, not just the title of the role that I wanted, and the type of organisation as well. So it's it's really interesting talking about different career pathways. I thought I was a mess in my career, but then I realised that I'm not a mess. Everyone goes through that same process. And
Definitely.
when you're at uni, and I don't know if all the students here can agree, but you're asked, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? And you're expected to have a really simple answer for that. I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a doctor, I want to be an environmental scientist. But, being an environmental scientist could mean 5 million different things. And, for all those professionals in the room that have been in their careers a long time, I suspect that not many of you can say that you're working in exactly the role that you thought you would when you commenced your career. So I think it's about having openness and flexibility in that pathway. Your pathway is going to be a mess. It's supposed to be, and that's what helps you really figure out who you are and the kind of person you want to be and the kind of impact you want to have. So yeah, it's about getting comfortable with that discomfort. Yeah.
And you've also talked about being comfortable with knowing what you can control and what you can't control. With things that you can control, have you managed to have any good effect in a workplace where you've controlled or you managed to change something? Or did you find you had to pack up and leave?
Yeah. Done some really cool things. Been able to deliver some really cool things. I think the biggest thing is around that establishing culture, establishing workplace environment that is not just about doing cool things, but creating careers for people, about creating the day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month life that people love and enjoy and find valuable and find energising. So I loved leading a team. I love leading a team, and I feel like that's a really important obligation to create. We call it psychological safety, so create a workplace that people are valued, and if you're at the table, you're there for a reason. It doesn't matter if you've got a year's experience, it doesn't matter if you're a senior executive with 30 years experience. Everyone adds different perspective, everyone adds the opportunity to add value, and creating an environment like that and seeing people thrive in an environment like that is so satisfying. So that's something I've really worked on over the last 6 years in particular, in more leadership type roles. And I think, we're so privileged to have great education, to have great opportunity, to live in this country, to live in this world. And we have an obligation to pass that on to those who are entering the workplace, to those who are developing themselves in a workplace, to those who are doing it tough, to those who are having different, experiencing different life circumstances. So for me, I think the greatest value is in those human experiences.
Paying it forward.
Yeah, and you can do so much more when you've got a team of cool people who are really excited about what they do. You know, you can achieve so much more. So I think that for me has been a massive shift from an engineer, very technical, very driven, very outcomes oriented, into a leadership role which is more strategic and more human and more about getting the most out of other people to do cool things rather than doing them yourself.
Yeah, I love your positivity. It's really infectious. And really wanting to lift other people up and bring other people with you so they can be their best as well. I can really see that there was a change in your values as a leader.
Yeah, it took me a while to get there, but yeah.
You got there in the end, that's what matters. All of us have gotten somewhere. Lorna, have you found that your experience with the Queensland film industry has ever conflicted with you as a lawyer? Have you ever found, because it sounds like you had that knowledge of what you wanted, so when you went into law, you knew what you wanted to specialise in. Did you ever doubt that or have any issues with trying to reconcile that?
No, I don't think so. In fact, quite the opposite. People who work in creative industries, they really treat what they do as a craft, and I took that approach. I really value having purpose and passion about what I do, and that's been a really valuable mindset to take to into law, because particularly in the area that I work in media and IP and privacy, that is just a really evolving landscape. There is regulation coming out all the time, so we're getting to work with these amazing clients, but you also have to have the passion and the dedication to be across, okay, well, what are all the new cases coming out? What are all the new discussions about the legislative changes that are coming out? And I found that it's been really wonderful actually to have straddled both sides of the fence, I guess, where if I work with creative clients and they sometimes feel like they need to sort of justify how they've gotten to where they are, and I just sort of think I have so much respect that you've made a profit out of what you're doing, and I think that what you're doing is really important. To put culture and to put art into the world, to me, is something that's really important. So I don't think it's conflicted at all. In fact, I think that in what the other ladies have mentioned, that you sort of take different mindsets and different ways of doing things from previous life experiences that you've had, and that helps you really have a quite steadfast sense of identity in what you're doing in your new role, and to bring a fresh perspective to it.
I'd like to open up the panel for some final remarks and anything else they'd like to add. First to you, Ricky.
Yeah, sure. Well, I was going to say, I think we've covered most of it. The last thing I did want to share with you is one of the values that I guess I've now worked out through a bit of experience out in the industry, and it's actually something that I learnt from Atlassian, which is a tech company, and they have a policy of no brilliant jerks. And essentially that is the logic of, at work, it is just as important about how things get done and how your behaviour makes other people feel. And there is no point keeping someone on the payroll that is a really high performer, hitting all of their targets and makes everyone else's life miserable. So I think for me that's something that's always resonated as a leader, is making sure that that I'm hiring and I'm leading in line with my values, and making sure that people feel really fulfilled as part of our team, and they're given the right opportunities, and they're given that opportunity to speak in a room. And that, I guess the method, how you get there, is just as important as the outcome, and making sure that that's something that I instill in my team. So yeah, the no brilliant jerks rule is always a handy one.
It's a fantastic point to make, thank you. Alison.
It's very unfair. I love Atlassian's values. Don't screw the customer is another one, which is an important one. They might have used different expletives. Yeah, I think sort of to an earlier point, it's really important to take the time to check in with yourself and reassess what's important to you, and be flexible to that changing over time, and to knowing that you don't have to have all the answers, and to know that you don't have to be working to a beautiful 5-year plan to be making really good progress in your career, and just keep focusing on the things that give you the next opportunity, that give you the next set of skills, that create, opportunity in the eyes of others for you to move into, and be flexible and adaptable in the way that you consider not just who you are and what kind of impact you want to have on the world, but how do you turn up every day to work, and how do you influence those around you as well. That will change a lot. It will surprise you, it won't surprise you, and so you've just got to ride that roller coaster, I think, and create the space to constantly check in with yourself and make sure you are doing the right thing by yourself.
That's a nice way to end. Thank you. And Lorna?
Yeah, I guess just to the earlier point of how you use your values to influence workplace culture, the only thing I'd say to that is sometimes we don't need to influence culture with our values by these big grand gestures, and the opportunity doesn't necessarily always arise. We all have quite a clear vision of the workplace culture that we want to work in, and so it's usually the everyday behaviours that we can all do, and to help create that culture. We can get as much training from HR as we like, but it's really down to us as people to do that. So if you want an inclusive workplace culture, if you've got a new person in your team, take them out to coffee and really get to know them, and make them feel like you've gotten to know them on a genuine personal level so that they're brought into the team. If you value teamwork, one thing that my team does great is that we never log, if we've got a big job that comes in, no one ever logs off until we all know that we've all finished for the day and we get to go home to our families. So I would really encourage everybody that if you do have certain values, stick to them and do that in a positive way to make workplace culture better.
Thank you. I think the consistent theme is to be kind to yourself and be kind to others, and to not forget and lose yourself in that job. And on that note, I'd like to ask everyone to please thank our wonderful speakers today.
Thank you all. Some really interesting insights there, and I hope that people are feeling a little more confident in aligning their personal values to those of their workplace. Even though those things change along the way and the journey might be a mess, it's still really important to hold on to those values. And I think if last year has taught us anything, is that a linear plan is probably not going to work very well. So keeping to your values, and I love that phrase, how you turn up. I think that's really the key takeaway for me from today. I'd like to thank our panellists, Alison, Lorna and Ricky, along with our host, Katerina, for a really insightful discussion, and a big thank you to all of you for joining us. I think we do have a little token of our appreciation for you ladies for volunteering your time to be here and share your thoughts and insights this morning. So thank you again. So the last thing, just to let you know this morning, is that we will send you an email in the coming weeks with a link to the recording for this event. And the email will also include a short event feedback survey, which we really would appreciate you taking the time to complete. We do look at those and we evaluate them and we analyse them, and that's how we build and change our alumni programme to make it better and more applicable to the things that you're looking for. If you want to know a little bit more about what we do in the alumni programme, you can always sign up for our newsletter, which I'm hoping you're all getting, but you can also get in touch with us at any time and use our social media platforms to do that. I hope you all leave here this morning with new ways in which you can voice your values and influence the culture of your workplaces in positive ways. And we look forward to seeing you at other Griffith University alumni events soon. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.